Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be talking about how to do a common task in many assignments. That is, how to make a quick and focused literature search to be able to search the electronic resources at ACU and identify the materials that you need to support or bolster or base an argument or other part of your writing on, and to be able to quickly return to the task at hand. This is a different topic than if you were trying to do an extensive literature search for, say, a meta review, a systematic review, or something like that, or the literature review for a master's thesis or dissertation. This is the sort of search that you might do if you're writing a course paper and you're required to get one or two outside sources, and it's the sort of information that you would find in a scholarly journal article. Because of the focused and expedited nature of this webinar, we are going to run through a number of things that we have slides that you can download from the ACU Online Writing Center website, but that we're not going to be talking about today. But you can watch just about any of our other webinars and you will find the information on things like how to sign up for an appointment, how to access our archive of webinars, and other things like that. You can also pause the video at any time to read any of the slides that are shown here, but we are going to continue straight forward until we get to our learning objectives. So our main objectives today, we're going to examine an assignment from Leadership 721 that requires that you do a quick and focused literature search. We know that it's a quick and focused literature search because you have 1 week to do it, and the paper is only supposed to be 2 or 3 pages. So part of the thing that we want people to recognize is to keep your search efforts commensurate to what you're doing. There will be times where you'll be asked to explore a narrowly defined topic in depth, but many of the things that you'll encounter in any of our programs, whether it's business, counseling, conflict resolution, leadership, nursing, you'll be looking for evidence to support a specific thing or to expand on something, and you're not looking for an exhaustive collection of all that there is out there, hence the need for the search. So we're going to follow up that exploration of this assignment with looking at when you would want to use a quick and focused literature search. Then we're going to talk about the principles of doing that and the practical elements of that, and we'll finish with a discussion on outlining drafting. Now, the focus of this webinar is on that search process. So if you're here just for the outlining and drafting process, skip ahead, but let's dive in and look at this assignment here. So this is coming from Leadership 721, our Contemporary Issues in Organizational Leadership course, and specifically the Week 3 Collective and Shared Leadership Skills paper. Now, the instructions here begin with the breakdown of the assignment. After reviewing the readings for this week, write a paper of 2 or 3 pages on collective and shared leadership, and you're supposed to specifically identify the skills needed for that, reflect on the skills that you possess or would need to develop in order to successfully be a collective or shared leader. And you're also, when you're doing this, supposed to have at least 2 additional scholarly journal articles that you use as sources, in addition to the assigned reading for this week. The assignment reminders iterated here are that you need to follow the standards for APA style, cite and reference your sources, have a reference page for the references, follow general good writing standards, graduate writing expectations, that you proofread, that things are organized, correctly formatted in APA style, all that stuff. So the main meat of the assignment is on this page. This is just reminders. You're writing in APA style, you're writing a graduate paper, don't forget to proofread. But if we look at the rubric here, note the first 3 content rows here, starting demonstration of, clear identification, and reflection on. So these 3 things, if we compare with this list here, remember that the 3rd bullet item is just saying make sure you have at least 2 sources. So in this breakdown here, we have identifies a skill needed by collective or shared leaders, followed by reflect on the skills you need to do this yourself. And if we look at the breakdown in the rubric, we have demonstration of understanding of the shared and collective concepts of leadership, and separately, clear identification and discussion of the skills needed for both, and then a reflection on personal skills. So what's 2 items in the instructions, 1 and 2, is 3 separate items on the rubric. So when you are laying things out, I would recommend that you follow that and have 3 different sections with their own headings to make it clear that you're doing each of those and doing that in appropriate depth. Because if we look at the breakdown of points here, we see that reflection on your personal skills, okay, that's 2 points out of 10, but we have 3 points for those other 2 things when we combine them. So, also keep note that there is significant weighting to having the quality of this. So even though it's just 2.5 to 3 pages in length, we have 2 points allocated to it being in the right length and formatting, and another 2 points to the quality of the writing. And so this is one of those things that tells us, okay, make it good. It'll be short, but make it good. So when do you want to do a quick focus literature search? Now, if we look at the length here, it's only 2.5 to 3 pages, not counting the title page, not counting the references. That's not a lot of space. So we're not going to be writing about tons and tons of extra sources. But we need a couple to bolster our argument and make sure that things are still current. And so let's talk about some of the pros of doing a focused literature search. One is that the more focused it is, the faster it tends to be. You can focus on identifying recent literature. And to give an example of a topic in education leadership that has really depended a lot on recent literature, but leading the schools and school districts in the time of COVID. There have been a ton of disruptions, unlike anything in recent memory. And certainly the way that technology has, in some cases simplified, in some cases complicated, is something that has only really been studied in the United States on this sort of scale with the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you're doing something on leadership in that kind of context, of course you would want to have recent literature. That's one of the reasons you'd be doing the search, to update and supplement the older stuff with things that say, okay, and here's how it's worked out in COVID, and here's what you should do, or here's what doesn't work out, or here's things to be cautious of, as the case may be. And it's a great way to get highly relevant results. And this is partly because of the specificity that you can do with a focus search. And we'll talk about that more later. Some of the cons or downsides, well, you're kind of doing a little bit of a trade-off in acceptable versus the best. Let me explain the difference. If you are writing a course paper, you want things that will give the necessary information for that course paper. Now, you might identify a journal article that talks about something in a context that is reasonably similar to the context you're trying to apply for things. But if you're doing a master's thesis or a doctoral dissertation, you'd be trying to find the closest, most direct analogs as you can. And because that's a much larger work, you have more time that you spend into it. So you are expected to be finding the best things for key tasks. So there's a little bit of trade-off. You're doing this focus thing, and you might screen out something that you might be even more suited for what you're doing. The focused literature searches tend to omit older and sometimes keystone or seminal pieces of literature. And that's partly because that looking at things that are more recent to try and get things that are most applicable or that are very clearly immediately applicable will be excluding some things that may still be getting cited, may still be used as a basis for, say, core theories or models and things like that. In doing a focus search, you're more likely to miss confounding or opposing literature. And that's not just because of, you see an abstract that looks like it got meaningful results. There's what we call the publishing bias towards meaningful results. So all the things that didn't work out tend not to be published about. It's a well-known phenomenon in academic literature, and if you're doing a very tight focus search, you want to get in, get out, you're more likely to not read about that sort of thing. And so it does make harder for you to make a more balanced and fully formed argument. But keep in mind, this is a short paper. This is 2.5 to 3 pages. If you're going to be listing all the cons of it, very likely you'll be starting to get a longer paper, 5 or 6 pages at least. So keep it in mind. What is the goal of the assignment? What are the assignment parameters? What do you have the latitude to do for this assignment? So if we're evaluating these here. Now, rapid search. Well, that's a virtue if you're writing a short paper. Recent literature, generally a good thing. Relevant results, also very good, especially if this is an assignment that is not going to be the be-all, end-all. It's not something you're publishing, but it's how you're working out, understanding ideas, and how to apply them to your sort of professional situation. So, some questions to ask. Is a quick and focused literature search helpful? And let's ask, are you trying to get a quick sense of what's available, or some of what's available? If yes, focused literature search is good. And in fact, a lot of my dissertation students will start with a focused literature search because they're just trying to wrap their heads around a topic, and then they'll follow up the more in-depth stage. If they did the in-depth thing first before they really got a sense of the topic and the literature on it, then it would be like diving into the morass and just getting confused or stuck. So if you're not trying to do that, then if you're not trying to get that quick sense, if you're trying to get that expansive thing or do an exhaustive survey or evaluation like a meta or systematic review, then focused literature search is probably not the right tool for what you want. Now, if you are not doing one of those things, as I said, focused literature search are good. If you are, well, you should talk with our library staff. They will help you do that kind of search. That's when you're like, okay, so between these years, there were X number of articles on this topic and how we examine them and are comparing them, which is not in the scope for this kind of assignment. But if you are doing that, talk with our library staff. They're very helpful for designing something like that. So let's talk about the principles here. Again, if you are doing this for a larger project, you may be wanting to be doing something more expansive or setting up search notifications or other things like that, again, talk with our library staff. So 4 principles. Start with broad restrictions, the kind of parameters that narrow down what you're looking at. Try more than one keyword combination. And in fact, if you know that there's likely to be some search synonyms, for example, in education in the United States, you might have junior high school, middle school, upper middle school, all referring to the same thing. And so there are ways that you can work that into your search to get all of those. Look at existing articles that you find on the topic and see how those are tagged or sorted, how they're labeled with subjects and keywords. And if you have really a small number of results, you probably want to broaden that. If you've got a ton, you probably want to narrow that. So let's talk about that broad restriction. So some common broad restrictions that we recommend off the bat: only searching peer-reviewed journal articles. Now, if you're doing some things where the kind of information you're looking for might be found in, say, government reports or other gray literature, okay, you want to specifically be searching for those. But if you're just looking for peer-reviewed journal articles as credible sources to bolster your argument or to inform your argument, might as well check that off the bat. Also, if you're in one of our online programs where you're on a 7-week semester schedule, then you probably don't have time to be waiting for interlibrary loans. You want to be looking for full-text articles for things for assignment due this week. If you're working on your final paper in your weeks ahead, you can certainly request via interlibrary loan, and our office is pretty fast at getting those. But if it's you only have days to write the assignment, waiting for a couple days for a source to come in might not be as helpful as, oh, here's something that does the things I need that I can access right now, that I can read the full text online. Another good restriction: to search for recent literature. Now, what that means exactly is variable on the topic and to a certain extent on the field. Think of the kind of events that would make something less current. So, for example, in the United States, in the last 2 decades, we've had a number of public school education reforms. The No Child Left Behind Act, for example, the launch of the core curriculum. And these are things that have hugely transformative effects that make it very difficult to compare with previous data because so many things have changed. And so if you're writing about something related to those, you might have a cutoff related to one of those events. Similarly, in healthcare, we have the passage of the Affordable Care Act and the implementation of different aspects of that. And so you might move the line for recent literature. We have had some notable events in the United States that significantly change the healthcare landscape on certain topics, and just this last year. And so what qualifies as relevant and recent will depend on your topic. But a generally accepted definition, last 5 years. Most professors will say, yes, that makes sense. It's relatively recent, unless there's some nearer watermark that you're like, okay, this changed everything. And one of the things to keep in mind there is that if you are working towards a doctoral dissertation or something like that, you want as many of your sources as possible to be recent according to counting back from whenever that is defended and published. So if you're planning on defending in 2024, you might be looking at, okay, let's look at literature from 2020 to present, which may be just 3 years or 2 years old now, but in a couple years, it'll be right at that 5-year mark. So keep that in mind based on your assignment and based on your topic and based on when or if this is going to be published. Language restrictions. Now, I happen to be bilingual in French and English. I am happy to read articles in French most of the time, but that may not be relevant to your situation. In fact, I would say that most articles on education leadership topics involving the American public school system are not going to be written in French. It's not that they can't be there, but generally speaking, we're more likely for that to be in English. So I can broadly restrict my search results by checking that material published in English box. You might also similarly have a geographic restriction, like, okay, well, I'm working in Texas. Texas has its own state education regulations, so you are only looking at research done in Texas, for example. Now, you might also try some keyword combinations like collective leadership or shared leadership or collective and shared leadership. If you take that whole bullet and you paste it into the search, you'll get looking for either of those 3 things that are in quotations. So it helps cover your bets, so to speak, or cover your bases. Similarly, you could secondary school or high school, middle school or junior high school, turnover or layoffs or restructuring or other phrases that you find are common there. And if this is a topic that interests you, our library has some excellent staff who can not only help you in real time, but also walk you through constructing a search like this. And they respond to emails very quickly, or live chat. Principle number 3, look at the existing classifications for things and see how they're sorted. And for this one, we're actually going to take a quick look at the distance education catalog and look at how you would find this information. So here we are on the distance education learning portal at ACU. You can see that we have one of those broad limit to peer reviewed, that we can click on here just to start things off. And we'll move into the main library catalog. But let's say we are searching specifically for shared leadership. And we run the search. It's going to pop open a new window. Now, it turns out that as I was recording this, there was a issue with the server, probably because over Labor Day weekend is a popular time to do systems maintenance, because most people are on vacation. So I've brought up the catalog of another university system, Boston University Library, because the same principle is going to be applicable. The exact ways that this looks is going to be a little different, but we have a search for shared leadership, we have restriction to peer-reviewed articles, and if you're looking at the ACU Library catalog, these criteria here to restrict will be on the left side. Here they're on the right-hand side. But we see right now we're looking at 1,313 results. Now, if I restrict that to journal articles, that's going to narrow it down a little bit, but not a ton. We still have 1,283. And so now I can look at how I might restrict this to more recent literature. You know, there are lots of things in the 1970s that were great, but I wouldn't presume that the business environment and leadership environment would be exactly the same now as it was 50 years ago. So let's go ahead and let's say we're going to be looking for research from 2019 to present. So I'll go ahead and hit update there. And then we will see we still have 433 results. Oh, great. So now's the point where we start looking at, do we want to have something that is on a specific topic, like perhaps team performance, or about the distribution of tasks, or, you heard me talking about meta-analyses earlier. So meta-analyses is, in a broad sense, you gather together different studies on a topic, and you say, okay, we're going to compare this and look at what we can draw as conclusions from all of this. So all these studies looked at this. So how many of them looked at this specific thing in this way? And what did they find? So X percent said this was great. X percent said this was bad. Things like that. And so if you're writing a general paper, that's actually not a bad thing to be looking at. So let's go ahead and let's look at the entry for this. This is the catalog entry for it. So I'm not going to look at the article itself just yet. We just want to see information about it. Now, a couple things that you'll see right away, besides the journal information here, who wrote it, what's it called, when was it published, we have related reading recommendations here. Now, this is algorithmically generated, but if you're interested in this meta-analysis, you might be interested in this earlier meta-analysis too, since it's specifically on shared leadership and team effectiveness. Here's a link to access it. You can have a citation link, which again looks a little bit different in the ACU library catalog, but the same basic idea. And here we have an abstract of the article, a quick summary of what they did. They looked at 40 studies, and then here we have a short report on the findings. Then you're going to want to read the actual in-depth finding section of the article if you're using this. But for finding out, is this the kind of thing that you want to use to go and look at the whole journal article, the abstract is a huge time saver. Now, we see here that, intergroup trust and task interdependence, I should say, are things that they noted were very important in the shared leadership and team outcome relations. So that is some kind of thing where if that's an angle that interests you or that you're specifically trying to work on in yourself, you might say, yes, this study is especially useful. I want this to be one of those that I'm going to cite. Okay, so whichever you find out, this is one way of looking at things. See what the algorithm thinks is similar. We here see the subject classifications, participatory management, teams, and some articles will also have listed at the bottom different search keywords that you can copy from there. Not all will. It kind of depends who entered it into the database and whether the authors specified that, but often you'll find them. Now, another thing that is helpful to look at is to say, okay, I want to see what's cited in here. And so most library catalogs now will show you a list there, and that may also be things that you're interested in looking at. So they look themselves at another couple meta-analyses. All right, back to our main presentation. And the next principle, broaden with a few, narrow with a lot. So if we go back to our catalog results here, we've got 68. So that's not bad in terms of narrowing things down. But if we had shrunk it to, literature published since, let's say, 2021, and found there are only like 4 articles, you would probably want to broaden that. So if you don't get a lot of results, cut back on one of the broad restrictions. And if you get too much, look at other ways you can restrict it to be more specific to your particular case. Now, I showed you the ACU distance education portal. You can also use a source like Google Scholar. The main thing is that if you're using Google Scholar, there's often an extra step in order to access the material that you find there. So there's a way to integrate Google Scholar so that you will basically be clicking to the ACU catalog. That's something that you can write us for additional information or contact the library because they deal with that directly. All right, so let's talk about how to go from the outlining and drafting process after taking a look at what's out there. So you're going to want to get a copy of our APA course paper template. And when you're laying out your paper, start with adding the kind of delineations or divisions in the paper laid out in the instructions. So if there's an assignment prompt or a line in the rubric for some particular content area, give us a heading for that. Format that heading in APA style, and then underneath that, add a bullet and start listing the specific tasks. Make sure you add an area of bullets at the start for the information that's going to go in your introduction, but don't put a heading called introduction. That's something APA style specifically prohibits. And then for longer papers, you're going to want to add a conclusion. For this one, see if you have space for a conclusion after you've done all the things required in the paper. Probably you will, but you want to stick to that length because you're being graded in part on delivering the assigned stuff in the specified length. For your headings, make sure that you use the built-in template styles, and you can see this demonstrated in many of our other videos. In this case, because it's a short assignment, not many subdivisions, you're going to be using APA Level 1 headings, and make sure you format those headings in title case. And again, don't add an introduction heading. But if you do have a conclusion, make sure you have a conclusion so it's clear that you've gotten to that. Now, if you're wondering, okay, well, how do I go from those instructions that say just identifies the skills, reflects on the skills, to filling out a whole paragraph or paragraphs? Because remember, each of these numbered prompts here, 1 and 2, is going to be something over a page in length. Well, that's where you can review something like the no tiers plan that we discussed in other webinars for breaking down. Okay, starting with the topic sentence, what's your direct answer to the prompt? What are the most important things? And then tell us about that. Oh, this thing was cited by this author who recommended using this for this situation. Or this meta review found that X is going on and this is very important in this outcome. So the first thing is to just answer the prompt, then give us some evidence. Cite the literature, say, okay, what did this author say or recommend or find? And discuss that. Okay, well, did they do this with a lot of people, or in a case of a meta study, did they look at it across different areas or regions or levels of leadership to make this clear that this is relevant to what you're doing? Repeat that as necessary, and then tell us with synthesis, okay, so what should we do with that? With this in mind, especially if you're talking about your own professional development, what will you do in light of the skills you've identified that you want to build? What does the literature say you should do to do that? And if you do that, you will find that the information in the assignment instructions ends up laying out a pretty clear roadmap for writing a paper of roughly 2.5 to 3 pages, because you've got a number of things to talk about, some things that you can certainly expand on, and you can always bring additional sources into the matter. So as you are laying out, if you have identified an article that you find is relevant and helpful, well, make a space for that in your outline too, to note that, oh, your supporting citation for this part of the argument is here, and to summarize or synthesize information from this source here. Well, I promised you a quick and focused webinar, so this is coming up on it. If you have any questions about the things presented here, please feel free to send us an email at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. You can schedule an appointment online. Go to my.acu.edu and select the resources drop-down and select Online Writing Center and just follow the instructions to schedule an appointment. And you can find any webinars like this and templates and other resources on the Online Writing Center website. That's it. Have a good night.